Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. It's been over a year since I've recorded a video. Lots changed. I'm really shocked, and I want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone because I'm now on 99 subscribers, so only one more subscriber, and I hit 100. And to be honest with you, I'm just absolutely amazed. Really amazed. I never thought I'd get this far. So yeah, it's thank you guys, thank you massively, and hit that subscribe button. You could be the person that takes me over to 100, and that'd be amazing. So today I'm going to do a reaction to an American. It's JPS, and he has a fantastic YouTube channel. So head over there and and look at some of his content. It's definitely worth watching. He's just a really great guy, and he often does reactions to British videos and stuff, and it's always good to hear another person's perspective on stuff. So today he's done a video called "Why Do the British Look Down on Americans?" So yeah, it should be interesting. So it'll be great to hear his perspective on the video, and then this is going to be a reaction on top of a reaction. So not sure how it's going to go, but hey, we'll give it a go and we'll see how it, hopefully it won't be too confusing or too, time consuming. But yeah, anyway, let's get into it.
What's going on, guys? JPS back for another video, and today we have quite the interesting one. This one is titled, "Why Do the British Look Down on Americans?" So, quite the question there. Personally, I don't think the British necessarily look down on Americans, but given how similar yet different we are, there's bound to be some friction within our opinions of each other. And you see that a lot with, sometimes I think the poking fun, there's a bit more to it than just poking fun at each other. I'm not saying this is a one-sided video or making any claims about that. Just had to preface this because, I love you guys, Brits. Love the Brits.
We love you too. I think it might be that the Brits generally, I don't know, I think, before we get into it, I don't think the British necessarily mean anything. I think a lot of people, British love banter. They love to, have a little dig and a little poke at fun at. So I don't think it's we look down on Americans at all. And there may be some that do. Every culture has people that do stuff, don't they?
So I didn't want to, have that type of narrative or have you guys
don't worry.
think that was happening. But anyways, we're gonna get right into this. This is by, I forgot the name of this channel. It's Nathaniel Drew. He makes some really good videos. Reacted to some of his videos about Europe and some European opinions on Americans, which they have their own thoughts.
How do you feel the British perceive Americans?
I feel like there's quite a lot of, I hate to say it, but mockery involved.
I think a lot of people think Americans are extreme.
Do you think that the British think that they're better than Americans?
I think some do, yeah.
There's a lot to make fun of, I think.
We're also fantastic at queuing as well. That's another great thing about us.
They're rubbing me the wrong way because they're too extra. It doesn't seem like it's genuine.
Today, I'm in London to get to the bottom of a very important question. For as long as I can remember, I have had the sense that the British look down on Americans. This is a generalization, and therefore doesn't apply to everyone, but it's a strong enough trend that I felt I needed to investigate this further. Here's a quote from Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, that perfectly captures the feeling that I have about this. With some, the anti-American sentiment ran very hot. I was reminded of my childhood, when people warned me all the time about Americans. Too loud, too rich, too happy, too confident, too direct, too honest. I'm very curious what people are going to have to say.
I don't know what Americans he met that were honest and direct.
Say about this.
Definitely, I do think when I've been to the States, they are. I was shocked at Americans, even the kids, because they were just so confident, so outspoken, and it was almost like even the geek nerdy people were just like so much more confident and outspoken than they are here. I think we're quite reserved in the UK, and we're very kind of polite, and we don't. I tell you what, I think it's the British are very polite, but the Americans are very friendly, I think is the best way of putting it. You have to speak up, you have to be noticed, you have to be, I don't know.
I have a feeling I'm onto something, okay? So, having said that, let's start talking to some people.
Really terrible that everyone's first attitude is, oh, you're from America. Like, oh, okay.
Really?
Which is always a bit, you always feel a bit bad about that.
So I've never noticed that at all. I've never noticed people go, oh, you're from America. They don't. Everyone's like, oh, wow. Most British people I know would be, oh, wow, you're from America. Let's talk. Or anywhere, really. Like anywhere that's...
Entirely sure why we still do that, but,
Yeah. How do you feel perceived as Americans by the British here in London?
A big, stupid, bellowing oaf. Really? Yeah, genuinely. I always feel like I have to apologize for being American. It's like, I know my accent's the worst thing you'll hear today, but can I just order a coffee?
My experience, I feel like, has been a little bit different. I think that might be somewhat informed by the fact that I'm a student here.
Okay.
At first, there was a bit of a learning curve. Like, when I would speak loudly on the tube, I would kind of get looks, and people would tell me, like, you're being American, like, can you maybe not?
There's
Very
definitely
loud,
sort of a sense that there is a lot of difficult things going on in America, and that America potentially could be quite a difficult place to live, especially if you're of colour or from the Middle East.
I have to admit, the inspiration to make
I think I know when this video was made, but yeah, there's a lot going on in this country, so...
this video came when I moved to Europe. As I've explored in previous videos on this channel, many Europeans have mixed to negative views of Americans as dumb and uncultured. But to my surprise, the same goes for the British. I've come to realize that the only people that see the British as intelligent and sophisticated are the Americans. Many Europeans, like the Portuguese
true.
or the
I think that's
Spanish,
probably
see
true.
a very different reality. The British that go off on holiday to get extremely drunk and break things. The British that are isolationist with Brexit.
Absolutely.
The British that
Absolutely.
don't learn foreign languages, that stick to their native tongue. Wait a
Absolutely.
second. I thought to myself,
This guy's rock
that's what
bottom.
Americans do. Other people do this as well?
How dare they copy us?
I kid, of course. Still, it does feel like the Brits act like the Americans of Europe, but I am certain that is not something that they'd like to hear said about them. I mean, no offense. I am American after all.
That's
Does
kinda
that
true, I'm
not
not gonna lie.
prove my point, though? No one wants to stoop to the level of Americans. I felt I had to get my answers directly from the source. My perception is that the UK is 1 foot in Europe, 1 foot like...
I'm sorry, that's a really good point. That no one wants to
Yeah,
stick
it
to
is.
that, because it's true. It has a negative connotation.
I
Oh,
love
you're
that.
American. Usually something good doesn't follow that, in my experience. Being in Britain as well.
Perception is that the UK is 1 foot in Europe, 1 foot like in the Americas. It feels like it should be in the middle of the Atlantic. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a pretty conclusive idea. Yeah, I think that's definitely
that's
true,
right.
because a lot of people wouldn't even class England as being in Europe. You know, even in England, when you talk about going to Europe, no one ever thinks you mean Doncaster. They always think you mean Germany. You do get some perception that everyone's some sort of like a Valley Girl accent or something like that, and I think that annoys people quite a lot. But then again, it's the same way that English people are often perceived as all sort of being from London. The American dream, making yourself better and being seen to be self-improving, and it's a lot about earning money and being the best you can and going to the gym and all these kind of things.
Do you think that's... Are you saying it's positive or negative?
I think it's a positive thing for Americans, but I think the way it's perceived is often everyone goes, oh, get out of my face, you know, because they probably... No one likes to enjoy someone else's success, at least in England anyway. I think in America it's probably very different. Oh, great, you got a promotion. Fucking bastard, you know.
The identity of being American is like such a thing.
Right.
That I don't think other places have that as much.
Nationalism.
I don't think people are necessarily dumb, and I don't think it's a question of being dumb. I think it's just that there's this idea of like, being the best. To think that like people in America, depending on where you're born, you can have access to care or not, it's frightening. And I don't know how you can speak about being the best when you can't even make sure that everybody's like taken care of. Are you treating everyone the same way in America? No, not everyone is treated the same way, just like not everyone is treated the same way in Europe.
Yeah, I'd hold it there because I think there's a lot to unpack in that. I think, like, I think nationalism is still very big in the United States, whereas it isn't. I think in Europe, certainly because of possibly world wars, I think, especially in educational establishments, or like when you're being taught at school, nationalism is taught to be a bad thing. Having huge pride in your country and celebrating your country and stuff like that it's almost considered to be bad, negative. It has connotations that you could lead to certain things. And I think in Europe it's kind of interesting. Certainly, younger generations are more inclined to think of Europe as one, and having many nations together, rather than certainly the older generations. I don't mean to be insulting here. Are generally more, Britain, British accomplish this, British accomplish that. Whereas I think younger people don't really feel drawn to that sense of identity of being British. I think, for example, in the United States, there is still this America, make America great again. That I know that's a Republican slogan, but it's very kind of there's this nationalistic thing. But what she was saying about I think there's a difference in attitude, because in terms of, she was saying, there's no universal. I think she was saying about universal access to healthcare, or I forget what she was saying. But yeah, I get the sense in the United States that there is this work hard ethic, and to be successful, but it is very kind of self-driving. Whereas I think one of the key differences, in the United Kingdom, for example, we look to the government. We look to the government to provide. We look to the government for reasons why things aren't working. We look to the government to help us improve. Things like pensions or, the health service, things like that. We look to the government to provide universal care or universal, to level up almost. Whereas I think in the United States, it's very much, the onus is on the individual. The government is there to govern, obviously, but it's kind of like, you should do things more yourself, perhaps. And there's a measure of self-success. And if people aren't doing so well at that, then there is help, but it's not quite perhaps the same.
Good points.
Having been
Good
to
points.
America a lot, they often ask, obviously as a joke, but just like, do you know the royal family or anything like that?
So do you feel that generally, this big generalization, there's mockery towards the Americans and Americans towards the British? It's more like cute. We think you're cute.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
How do you feel about Americans thinking you're cute?
Well, it can be taken as a compliment, obviously, but if they think that we're, like, as a country, not really a force to be reckoned with, then just because we do all these, like, things that date back to long before the US was established, it's not really relevant that they can mock us for that.
Is it condescending, would you say?
A little bit.
Or ignorant?
More ignorant. It doesn't, like, hurt me.
How do you feel Americans perceive the British?
No idea what this is about.
They kind of look down on us.
You feel that?
I feel like Americans think like they're on top of everything, and there's always competition between the two.
So do you feel like the British have a chip on their shoulder a little bit because of that?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you think the British are better at than Americans?
Yeah, so see, I think I have a different viewpoint than that. I don't think Americans think about us that much at all. I like it when they say, what do you think Americans think about you? I reckon most Americans don't think about us at all. They don't even think, we're not even on their radar. I think there are always going to be perhaps maybe there are Anglophiles that would think about us particularly. And as they say, they might think, oh, that's cute. But I doubt Americans really worry about what goes on in Britain or the UK. Why would they? It's like, people forget, I think, especially in the world, the United States is such a huge country. It's like, is it 350 million, something like that, people? I don't know. But America, it's a huge country, the United States. And it's kind of like, there's so much to do there, so many things to see. And it's like, and also there's the distance as well, isn't there? Like, when you're going on holiday within the US, or maybe you go to Mexico, but flying to Europe is a big deal because it's very far away. And it's kind of like, there are so many different countries. And not only that, and I don't wish to be rude to certain people, but America kind of is on top. They kind of are up here. And some of it, sometimes I wonder if it's jealousy, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, are people jealous of the US? What do you think? Let me know. I don't know. I think it's 2024, isn't it? Everyone has a strong opinion. So it's, I don't know. I don't know what it is. What is it? I don't know.
Polite, really.
More polite.
Yeah. More talkative, more helpful.
More helpful. The British are more helpful.
Yeah, than Americans. But Americans are nice, they're funny, got good music.
Got good music, okay. Yeah. Well, the British have good music too, man.
Americans are taking over
the
music scene.
Nah,
but
bro.
I mean, come on, there's a...
bro, no. British music is where it's at.
I think they're all good.
Beatles, Rolling Stones.
Well, it's very old, but
Oasis,
I think
Queen.
they both have. There's such a wide variety, isn't there? It's kind of like, there's all so many different styles and genres that both countries have. So it's, I think they're both great.
The condescending thing, I can definitely agree with. Like, especially when it comes to memes and stuff, a lot of Americans just don't take Britain or British people seriously. Like, that's just a fact. I know a lot of people don't, but people around me, they see things differently because I told them they seen the channel, guys. They know.
A lot of great British music. So here's the thing that I think is going on here. We are not the same, the Brits and the Americans, but we sure have a lot of similarities. Compare us to the Japanese or to Native Americans or to Ethiopians, and the differences between Americans and the British seems relatively small. We're like blood siblings in the village that is the globe. So here's what all of this started to make me think of. There's a concept in psychoanalysis, I'm going to read you the definition, but it's called the narcissism of small differences. This comes from Freud. The narcissism of small differences is the idea that the more a relationship or community shares commonalities, the more likely the people in it are to engage in interpersonal feuds and mutual ridicule because of hypersensitivity to minor differences perceived in each other. We see this all over the world, between the Argentinians and the Chileans, for example, between the French and the Belgians. And indeed, I think this is what is happening between the Brits and the...
Between the Protestants and the Catholics, between the da-da-da, like, bro, yeah. We love to fight.
Americans. But at the end of the day, I feel like we make the little things that make us different much bigger than they really are.
The way that we speak and the words that we use.
Yeah.
And again, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah.
About
we were
certain
talking
words.
about things like autumn versus fall. And
Yeah.
like that's often something that people like bring up. And for some, well, it's because it's a simpler word. And it's like, fall, American.
You guys don't say
classic.
fall?
No, we don't say fall. We
Oh,
say
interesting.
autumn.
Okay.
So it's
Autumn.
autumn. Not fall.
But you can say autumn as well. And by that I mean, culturally, it feels so much more similar to the life that I had in the US. The convenience of life, the speed, the capitalism, the language.
Everyone speaks English. Everyone's like got the same sort of core values. I'm not necessarily a big Christian person at all, but we all come from this like Christian-based countries. America and Australia are English. There's some things that happen in history, but at the end of the day, we're kind of all the same group of people in that regard.
Culturally influenced.
Culturally influenced by the same group. So I personally don't see many differences at all.
I mean, I've got wonderful American friends who I adore. So that question for me is a difficult one because I think they're great, they're fantastic. Yeah. I think the differences in the way our language is, in the way we use different words, that's where there's a difference.
So pretty minor.
Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes some of the British media or the portion of the British population that looks down on Americans, is it a way to deflect some of the issues that exist here? Could that be said of all societies?
Yeah, you can say that of all societies, but you can also say that about the media. They're always distracting, aren't they, from topics, whatever it is.
America's seen as very alpha.
Oh my God, bro. I love this lady. She's speaking the truth right now. But, yeah. I mean, we do the same thing in the United States. We're always talking about what this country's doing or how great we have it. But recently, it feels like, I don't know, among my generation, things are really different. We're kind of the, we're not going down a good path generation, and there's not much we can do to stop it generation. So that's where we're at, guys. Not very happy.
See, I disagree. There's not a lot you can do about it. I think the key is numbers. If you all speak out on a common goal, a common viewpoint in high numbers, people will have to listen to you. And I think it's the problem is we're very fractured at the moment, and I think it's the same for a lot of societies, isn't it, around the world? We're all very fractured, and it's something that I'm really shocked at. When I was a kid, my generation is Generation X, and I thought that everyone would come together in this like unity, I guess, through technology and things, and it's just not happened. And it's, if anything, things seem more fractured than they were when I was younger, and it really shocks me, actually. Really, really shocks me at the moment how divisive things are. And not only that, how passionate people are and how almost argumentative they've become. And it's like different viewpoints. And it's like, I may say something that is inflammatory, but don't hate me. It's just an odd flippant comment, or it's just a quick viewpoint, Sometimes it's ill-informed, and it's almost like there needs to be more love in the world, I reckon.
Feminine. Yeah. There's an alpha maleness to Americans. And maybe it's just the way they speak, the accent, but you don't really have that sense of Britain. I think there's a stereotype of the repressed male, that soft-spoken.
Considering we're like right on the edge of Europe, we have more in common with America in many ways than we do with the rest of Europe, which in theory is where we should be more aligned. And I think there's sort of something that can feel sort of slightly odd about that, like with the whole Brexit thing, breaking away more from where we're most closely connected to, and sort of being in a situation where, we're going to end up with chlorinated chicken instead.
There's this tendency to think of Americans.
That whole chlorinated chicken thing. So that came about after Brexit. There was this thing where we were trying to, or it was talked about, would we be able to strike up trade alliances around the world because we've lost our biggest trading partner, the European Union. And it was kind of like, let's look to the United States for a big trading partner. And generally what people thought, and it was Donald Trump kind of didn't help matters in a way in this regard, because he tried, but he didn't there was almost this big little thing going on, so the bigger will force more on the little, and a lot of people were then scaremongering because they were saying if we do a trade deal with America, then the United States will kind of force their goods on us. They will not accept our goods necessarily. And there's a whole food prep issue, and it was around poultry and things in particular that it was kind of hyped up, I guess, about, because the United States in particular, they chlorine wash their chickens and things, which we don't do here. We do, I forget what we do here, but it's considered to be, I guess here, to be cleaner, and it's kind of like chlorine obviously is a dangerous element. You don't want to ingest it, obviously. And it's obviously, it must be safe because, because the Americans eat it, so it must be okay. But yeah, there was this general thing of, you guys use chemicals to when you're, preparing meats and things for clean. It was like, whoa, why? That's dangerous chemicals. And there was this whole thing about, we don't want chlorine washed chickens effectively. And it never happened anyway. There was never a trade deal anyway. So
it's just,
that's where that came from.
They're simplistic, really.
Are you annoyed by the Americans here?
Sometimes.
I wouldn't say.
Depends how they are.
Now, the interesting thing is, I love to drag the U.S. through the mud and criticize it for all the things that I think it deserves criticism for. But the second the Brits start criticizing me or the U.S., you have nothing to say. Kind of like, I can criticize where I grew up, but you aren't allowed to. And the British, in my opinion, are doing their version of the same thing, criticizing themselves to no end, but no one wants an outside opinion. Maybe we all do this.
Yeah, I guess
think we all do this.
You get defensive.
It's like pointing at someone else's flooding house when your own house is on fire.
So I lived in America for 6 years. I lived in California, Alabama, and Oklahoma for 3 years. Everyone hears my accent and is like, oh, where in America are you from? I'm like, bro, I'm actually from Australia, but then they give me their little opinions on American stuff. So I've actually had to play defense a couple times since I've been out here.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious. Because they talk about guns or they talk about this.
He does sound Australian and American. That's pretty cool. I was actually wondering this at first. I was like, what is this guy's accent? That's a cool combination.
It's funny, I was watching a TV series called ER, it was out years ago, and it was quite interesting because there were Americans that were going on this Doctors Without Borders, and they were working, I forget where it was it Rwanda? Or was it the Congo? I forget now. And it was funny how, when internationally, when everyone was around a table, let's say eating in an informal setting, having dinner or whatever in the evening, it was funny how all the nations all felt this need to take pot shots at the Americans. It was kind of like, American politics, America's involvement in the world and this kind of thing. And it was funny how it was almost like, everyone just started and I think the Americans were kind of like, dude, why are we discussing this? Why can't we discuss lighter topics, And people always have to bring up gun control or healthcare and I kind of was in agreement with it. I felt sorry for the Americans there. It was kind of like, they were kind of like, why do we have to have this debate constantly, Why do you have to bring up the Second Amendment? It's like, well, can't we just have a normal conversation?
Serious? I'm so serious because they talk about guns or they talk about this, but they don't have a very good understanding, not just English people, this is people around the world, even in Australia, of the history of America and why.
Absolutely agree with him, because here we're always like, why would you give access to guns, etc., because it's going to cause people to have mass shootings or there are going to be more murders and stuff, but they don't understand the history. Why did the Second Amendment come about? Why do Americans have this love affair with firearms and things? And because they don't understand the history, they tend to dismiss it and they tend to be insulting, and they shouldn't, because when you understand the history and the context of it, it all makes complete sense.
Why those things became what they were. People trying to throw rocks and then hide their hands. Yeah. They don't want the blame to be on them, so it's easy to put it on the big superpower that is on everyone's TV.
My perception is I don't consider Americans necessarily lesser in terms of lifestyle, culture per se. I just think it's a bit more apparent than it is in the UK, but the UK is just as problematic.
There's always sort of a sense in the past that America was sort of 2 decades ahead of what was happening in this country. There is a sense that we're getting closer in a time frame.
I would say younger generations tend to be a bit more, and the only word I can think of it is shameful of the heritage. I think it's a lot of things from colonialization and things like that. There tends to be a lot more shame around it.
We're a small island, right? So we've got a small island mentality, but because we've got a small island mentality, we've got to overcome it by kind of that impression that we're the best. And I think that's changing, though. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a total reflection of society now, but I think historically it has been, of course. Let's flip the question. How are Americans perceiving the British?
My answer to that is there is a power dynamic going on. And for better or for worse, the U.S. is much more of a world superpower right now.
Absolutely.
So I don't think that
Absolutely.
the US feels threatened necessarily, like competitive with Great Britain. Because of that, I think there's kind of like they're cute, you know what I mean? Like they're Harry Potter and James Bond and sophisticated and you know.
Use words like autumn.
Exactly. But I also think that there's also a major degree of ignorance. Like the US is so self-involved. We're not even paying attention to what's going on elsewhere in the world. So there's not even enough to form an opinion, you know.
But as I said, but Americans get a bad rap for this, and it's kind of like, but America is so huge. They've got so much they do have so much going on. So it's not any wonder that they don't know what's going on outside necessarily their own borders. Certain people don't, because it's like they've got so much going on within their own borders. And I always liken this to, it's like a lot of people I used to know who grew up in London. They had no idea of what was outside of the M25 line. You know, they didn't know geography in terms of like British towns and cities and where they were. But then when you have everything on your doorstep, really, you don't necessarily sometimes have to know unless you have a burning curiosity, unless you don't need to know as much sometimes.
No, that is so true right there. The self-absorbedness and not even like people don't.
It's
even
not
know
arrogance.
They just make jokes and talk about memes and stuff because they don't really have an opinion. They don't have enough facts or thoughts about Britain to form an opinion. That's why the basis for my channel has merit, because Americans aren't doing this, bro. And the crazy thing about Britain is, if you know nothing about it, it's easy to just like push it away and push it to the side. But the more I've been learning about Britain and becoming accustomed to what it's like, the more I've been questioning my own situation in the United States and like everything about this country. So the ignorance is, it's a false confidence because of that ignorance. If Americans were to learn more about Britain, I think they would have a lot more respect for the British. And I definitely saw that within myself. Because I don't know, I probably was one of those Americans like before.
Yeah, but as I say, don't be too hard on yourself, I wouldn't say, because everyone's like that until they learn. You know, when I was younger, I still am ignorant on so many. There's so much to learn in the world, isn't there? And when you're younger, there isn't really that. You're already learning so much anyway. You know, and eventually you'll learn more about outside. You know. But in America, because if you're a larger country, you've got more going on internally. You're more resilient to external shocks from what's going on in the rest of the world, perhaps. In the UK, we import a lot of stuff. Okay, we import a hell of a lot. We don't really manufacture a lot of stuff. Americans can manufacture their own stuff. They have a lot more raw materials. So in the UK, we're far less resilient to external shocks. So we kind of have to know what's going on in the world, because if suddenly there's a shortage of something, then it's all over the news as to what's going on. And if there's something going on in the world, you know, for example, at the moment, there are supply chain issues in the UK, originally caused by Brexit, and obviously there was COVID and all sorts. But now, for example, with what's going on in the Middle East, there's a lot of issues with shipping, that vital route, Red Sea inlet and stuff. And that's causing a lot more issues. And certainly next year, for example, and because of the weather and what's going on in Europe, we've had a lot of bad weather. We've had a lot of rain in particular. For example, as I'm recording this in February of 2024, it's actually the wettest February since records began. 2.5 times more rainfall than average. And so, therefore, the prices are going to go up on things. We're not really resilient to shocks. And so we really, and perhaps that's why we have to learn more about other things. Maybe it's because we're a small country surrounded by a lot of other countries. Therefore, we have to learn about the history of what's gone on, or I guess there's all sorts of reasons, isn't there, why that could be the case.
I didn't know anything about Britain, bro. And the crazy part is, like, so many Americans are literally have, like, English blood, Scottish blood, Welsh blood, Northern Irish blood. You guys get my point, though.
We get your point.
A lot of heritage that is not being explored, unfortunately. So, hey, but we can try and motivate people to do that.
This video was definitely supposed to be in good fun. I harbor no ill will towards the British. I find our rivalries as human beings across cultures, across nations, to be comical and interesting. It's like an insight into human psychology. And despite all of the, criticizing going on here, I'd like to end on a positive note. I'd like to express my appreciation for a few things that I think the British do better than Americans. Your healthcare system, for one. Also, the Premier League. They say football was...
It's free access to all, which is great. But at the same time, perhaps with the US, if you do pay a lot of money into, good health insurance and whatnot, perhaps at that top level you would get better care, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know, but then it's like anything, isn't it? If you're really, really rich, then you're always going to get the best of everything, I suppose.
England, and if that is true, as someone with Argentinian background, I can only thank you. I also have to thank you for your incredible
Argentinian background.
What a contribution to our collective heritage.
Wow.
It is a foreign idea to me to have a royal family, but I respect the commitment to tradition.
I did move here the week that the Queen died, so it was really interesting to see. I think my first impression of like the British as a public was that of like mourning for their queen, you know, the 14-hour-long line to go see her lying in state. So I think it was a little bit of a shock. This might sound silly, but how procedural the British can be. I noticed that tends to be like every British person I've met tends to be very procedural, as opposed to Americans. I think are a little bit more, like, dare I say, free-spirited or individualistic. So, I mean, I think that's not to say that one is better than the other.
And as a final note, we are obviously a world of individuals, and so stereotypes never fully work. Still, I find it so fascinating to explore the stereotypes and cliches that we have for one another. Not always, but often there is some sort of basis of truth there. Or else, they wouldn't spread and persist as they do. Anyway, having said all of that, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did...
It's a really good video. I have to check out Electric Light Orchestra. But anyways, guys, make sure you check out Nathaniel Drew. This guy makes really quality content. And I've enjoyed everything I've checked out from him. And I think I share very similar opinions about the topics that he explores, and also his own opinions on the topics he explores. So overall, I thought this was a really good video. I think everyone that was interviewed in this video had solid points. And that's the thing about the Brits and Americans. Yes, we do have our differences, but we are just so similar at the bottom of it. And I feel like every time I meet someone who's British, I have a great time. And I'm able to relate to them on a very high level, despite some cultural differences, some accent differences, of course. And yeah, I really just have fallen in love with Britain, and I don't see my life without it anymore.
Aww.
So that's where I'm at, guys. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Again, I had to give the preface at the start, this video. And it didn't even end up being like that. It actually ended up being a pretty lighthearted video, especially towards the end.
You did. Couldn't have said it better myself. If you like my video, hit the like and subscribe. I know, I appreciate I'm not very good at this yet. You know, it's early days on my channel. I've only really done like 2 or 3 videos, and they're not very good yet. And I appreciate I do talk sometimes too much over the video. I've got to learn that, and I make a lot of mistakes. So guys, I hope you can bear with me. You know, I'm trying to get better, and hopefully, you know, it's early days yet. Hopefully, you know, after a year or 2 of doing this, I get a lot better, and you know, it gets a lot smoother, and there's a lot less mistakes and things. And yeah, I learn more and go on and stuff. But essentially, I love America. I do. I love it. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to move there. I don't feel the same way now. I think I'd rather stay in the UK. But at the same time, you know, and I love all the world as well. I love all countries. And I love to learn about things. So, yeah, any opinions expressed, you know, it's not... I don't mean anything by it. I don't mean anything nasty. You know, I don't mean anything bad. So, yeah... hope to see you guys soon on the next one. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and thank you guys. I'll see you next time.